So the chances are that any car you would have driven would have been at some time tested with our technology. It's very clear from the start, so we are a company that supplies the automotive market, but we're not a company that actually provides any machinery that goes onto a car. This is all about the testing. And we do what the UK is very good at doing, which is advanced engineering. Specialist advanced engineering is what we're really good at in this country. And this is a snapshot of some of the products that we sell, and we'll come on to a bit more detail about what they are. Firstly, we supply advanced testing and measurement products to the global automotive industry. So anything to do with vehicle dynamics, how your car drives, whether it's pleasing or safe. More recently, we're talking about advanced driver systems and advanced systems and safety systems on cars, computer vehicle models. The industry is continually driving towards the virtual sign-off. One day they feel they'll be able to produce a car without ever producing the prototype. That's their goal, that's their vision. And ultimately at the bottom, the one we keep hearing about is driverless car technology. Whether we believe it or not, it's going to be something that's going to be introduced slowly over the next few years. And it has to be tested, and it has to be made sure that it's correct and safe and does what it says it does on the tin. And in fact, the image you can see on the right-hand side is from the proving ground at Stuttgart for Daimler Chrysler, well Daimler now. And that is actually their first prototype driverless car using an ABD robot system. So it does exist and it's been around. In fact, ABD have been doing driverless for 15 years. It's just taken the rest of the world to find out. So who are we? We're based down there in a little space in the West Country near Bath. It was founded back in 1982, and as the name suggests, Anthony Best Dynamics. There is an Anthony Best. In fact, Anthony is 79. He's still very much part of the company. And to be honest, he forms very much part of my R&D group because his ideas are still second to none. And we supply the R&D divisions of all of the car companies in the world. So any car company you probably think of would at some time have bought, used, or purchased and serviced one of our machines. As I said before, none of our products are found on vehicles. And more importantly, maybe unfashionably, we actually make everything ourselves. So everything that we engineer, design, is actually made at our factory in Bradford and Avon. And I guess, you know, in this country, we've forgotten maybe how good we are at making things. And this is a good testimony to the fact that everything that we design, we actually make ourselves. And although we can make cars follow paths to within 2 centimetre accuracy, it's not a driverless car, but we do help in their development. And we'll come on to why that's important. As I said before, all of the top 20 car companies routinely use our products. And it's worth putting this into a landscape, and the best way to explain this is that the bigger the name, the more we've sold to that customer. And what you're seeing now is that there are car companies, names that we recognise, but also to the side you've got supporting companies, tier 1 suppliers like Bosch and Continental. And equally there are testing places like Thatcham and Nitsa. So these are companies that actually buy our equipment to test people's cars, as well as the car companies themselves using the tools to develop cars. And more frequently now, there's companies in here called FAW and Great Wall, and these are the Chinese markets. What's happening at the moment is that the Chinese companies are not just happy to make copies of cars, but they actually want to make their own domestic cars that are pleasing to drive. And if you're going to do that, you're going to need the toolkit that we supply, because when you've got the toolkit, then you can seriously think about making cars that actually will compete against the Western market. And let's have a look at the context. Obviously, you can see the old healthcare up there has been a massive spender in R&D. But what surprises a lot of people is just how much is spent annually by the automotive companies on R&D. And in fact, if you look at the top 20 companies in the world who spend by R&D, number 1 at the top is Volkswagen. Despite what you might be hearing, they're still spending an awful lot of money on R&D. Maybe they feel they can research their way out of their problems. If you actually had a look at the other 6 in the top 20, you've got Toyota, Honda, General Motors, Daimler, and Ford. So it's a big mixture. And in fact, what has been happening recently now is for the first time, we're seeing companies in that computing and electronics area starting to move into the automotive. We've seen it with Tesla, we're hearing it with Google. There are other West Coast tech-based companies that are looking at the whole car industry, because they don't call it cars, they call it sort of personal transport systems. But mark my word, there's going to be a massive push over the next 2 to 3 years from the tech industry into the car industry, especially when we start looking at electric car platforms. I think one of the fundamental things that's happened recently is this thing that's happened in America with the diesel scandal. And in fact, I always knew that there was a disconnect between the real world and the testing. I never believed that someone would actually cheat it. But what that actually means now is that people are now looking at the electrical platform for the first time as a serious and realistic way of driving power. We're a growing company, as you can see, and there are a couple of landmarks here. The company was originally set up back in 82 and through the 90s as a consultancy company, and it provided consultancy to anything to do with suspension, braking systems, noise, vibration and harshness. What Tony and the team realised was that development was disappearing off the shores as the automotive development was disappearing. And the only way to stay engaged was to actually start making machinery that they could export. And in fact, the company started on a fairly good, ambitious R&D scheme and started moving its business up. But of course, 2008 is when the automotive R&D budgets were absolutely slashed. In fact, what caught the company by surprise was the severity of the reduction in spending. And in fact, there's a bit of inertia going through because these products take about a year to make. But what the company did is that it kept all its staff on board. It carried on with quite a big program of R&D. It had a number of fairly fundamental programs that it was working with some of the OEMs. What actually happened was when the order started to pick up, the business drove out very quickly. And in fact, when I joined the company, we had about 10,000 square feet of manufacturing and about 42 personnel. And today, we've just gone past the 86 mark, so in fact, this already is out of date. And next year, we have another 30,000 square feet of manufacturing and development space coming on stream. The company IPO'd back in, it'll be 3 years next week. And it was an important point for the company because there wasn't really an appetite for a management buyout. The directors who were there were technicians, they were technical people, they were scientists. They enjoyed the design, but they didn't enjoy the actual running of the business. After a couple of aborted trade sales, it was considered that an IPO may work. And in fact, we were one of the first companies to go to the market for some time. There were a couple of aborted IPOs, but we went in. And of course, we had a good story to tell. We had a historical growth. We had a story to tell about where we're going to be going. And so actually, the IPO was, in the event, quite successful. Not only have we been able to grow the profit, grow the revenue, we've been able to get a fairly good lift in revenue. And you can see the company's turned in a very small loss in 2010. But ever since then, it's been growing at a fairly profitable and sustainable rate. This little blip here is a consequence of doing an IPO. That's the cost associated with an IPO. But we've recovered and we've carried on driving. In fact, if you put it in the context of the margin, you can see here how effect it had on our actual margin for the PLC. For the operating company, that's been going pretty well. It's actually the drag that sometimes joining the market puts on you. It's very important to control those costs. So our geography, we're pretty well split. But if you looked at this picture maybe 7 years ago, China really wouldn't have been in the frame at all. In fact, China has become quite a significant spender in the whole realm of R&D. When we talk about Europe, I'm sad to say we talk about Germany. When Germany's spending money, that's where most of the money's coming from. And Japan is a big spender. Of that $105 billion a year that's been spent by the automotive industry, $50 billion has been spent by Japan. Japan is still a massive user and consumer of funding. But the obvious here, and a very disappointing 3% from the UK. And in fact, this year it's 0. So the analysis of the revenue, and we'll come on to some of the products, but we have what we call track testing and laboratory testing. And 3 years ago, that would have been roughly 50-50. It goes to show that the real drive in terms of vehicle safety and driverless cars has been driving our business. And as a result, the track testing has grown at a considerable rate. It's not like that big lab equipment has not been selling, it's just been staying where it is because we have a capacity issue inside the factory. It's very hard to develop these products because you wouldn't fit them in this room. They are enormous bits of kit. As I said, we IPO'd on this AIM market in May and at 86p, and of late we've done quite well. In fact, actually, the recently company, I think today it's about 480. But I'm a bit with my colleague here. I don't watch my stock. If you look after the business, if you under-promise and over-deliver, then usually you can do those kind of things. And there we are, sitting there 3 years ago, and knowing what's going to befall us. So the financial highlights from our half year, which was last month, is that we continue to grow. In fact, we've seen our revenues grow. Again, this is the first 6 months of the year. We continue to increase our profit. One of the benefits we've had recently is we've seen the currency come back our way. As an exporting company, we have to hold Chinese renminbi, yen, euros, dollars, and although we don't have any sophisticated hedging mechanisms, one of the beauties of holding cash is that you choose when to change your money over. Further expansion of the support engineering has been very important. One of the things I felt we had to do is be a bit more proactive about our business. So we set up operations in Japan and in Germany, and we've actually embedded our own support engineering out there as well. Every time we sell a machine, every time we sell a robot, that's one more machine that has to be supported. And our recurring revenue has come from 6% to about 11% this year. So we're now starting to pick up the recurring revenue. One of the most exciting things that's happened in the last 6 months has been this tie-up with Williams Formula One, Williams Advanced Engineering. It's a drive-in-loop simulator, and I can explain a bit about it later. And perhaps more significantly, we're in the process of building a new factory 400 metres away from our current facility, which will give us the headroom to grow further. So we're experiencing a lot of growth from drivers. One of the key things here really is something called ADAS, Advanced Driver Assistance System. So what used to happen is that you had what they call passive safety, airbags, safety belts, crumple zones. What's happening now is what they call active safety. The car is starting to make decisions for you. There are emergency braking systems in the car. There are lane departure warnings. There are even systems actually that bring you back into the middle of the lane. A lot of this technology is the prelude to what will become full driverless. At the moment, it's becoming standard on most machines. In fact, any car you buy from now on, any small car or large car, will have some form of emergency braking system. All that has to be developed. All of it has to be calibrated. Can't deny the fact that the R&D spending is still increasing year on year. And this is the big thing, the continued use of simulation modelling, the continued requirement to move models quickly through the organisation and use the simulation models. In fact, all of our machines generate the data that populate the vehicle model. So all our machines give that empirical data to the engineer that allow him to determine what a good car is and what it means in numbers. Once you know that, you can start to design the cars. So we're driving growth by investing in more capacity internally. We're trying to get more regional and technical support out there. And personnel, we hear that people talk about a people business. It genuinely is. We have 80 staff, 40 engineers, 20 software people. And in the last 4 years, we've had absolutely zero turnover of staff. We've got very good at retaining. We're very good at motivating, because this is where the innovation and idea comes from. This is where the company works. And we've been using our funds to leverage basically development of new products. 20% of our revenue this year came from products that weren't even on the statute 2 years ago. So we're very good at turning new ideas into products and getting that product pipeline, and that is key. And to be honest, one of the things that the car companies ask of us is not to be just a product manufacturer, but actually to be a solutions provider. They'll come to us with technical issues they're trying to resolve. We'll build them the machine or give them the technology that lets them do that work. More recently, now looking at what they call remote proving grounds. They want 50 cars running around a test track, 24 hours a day, with no drivers in them, because drivers get tired. That's one of the things we're working on now with the car industry. And we continue to explore new technologies in our area. We believe our sector is the automotive R&D. We want to stick to the knitting. We have looked at other sectors. We don't understand them. We don't know what they're about, but we do understand automotive. And those relationships in automotive have taken 20 years to build. So a quick snapshot of what the products are. I said I broadly split it into two areas. You've got the track testing, and this is the total testing of cars on a track, and then the laboratory testing, which are big bits of kit that actually test cars, suspension compliance and suspension. One of the big areas for us now is this driver-in-loop simulator. What I mean by driver-in-loop is if you've got a situation where an engineer has designed a car and he's taken it to a certain point on the computer, the natural second point is to build a prototype and to test the prototype. But wouldn't it be nice if you can get the driver back in the loop and drive the model? And up until recently, the simulators didn't exist that let you do that. What we're looking at here is ultra-realistic 4K video with motion platforms that are incredibly responsive. Any delay between what you feel and what you see on the screen will make you sick. And that's the issue, is can you make a dynamic enough machine with low enough latency, fast enough responses? Well, of course, what we discovered is that we've been doing this for years. This is what our machines do. So we're applying a lot of this technology into this simulator. We've taken the Williams Formula One platform and we're turning it into an automotive platform that's going to be used for the next 10, 20 years. And this is where the market is going. Simulation, virtual sign-off. That's where the money, that's where the budgets are being spent. So we were in China a couple of months ago, and we saw a bizarre street scene that what turned out to be our own hometown of Bradford-on-Avon. It was an image that we had rendered for them, and they were using it to hone and develop their cars. So it goes to show. Operationally, oops, can you see the map? That is a map. These are not random spots on a page that I there we are. So our model is a distributor model. It's worked very well for us. But as we get larger, we do need to take more strategic positions in some of the key markets. So that end, we have opened up a dedicated office in Japan. We've now recruited into Germany, and we're now looking at the US. But our distributors are really people who are already supplying into that market, already understand that market. But as we grow the business, we're going to have to be a bit more proactive about how we support our business. But we are in most of the major places where the automotive development is taking place. Our capabilities, if you've got nothing else from this meeting, just get this. Mechanical, electronics, software, we have all that in-house. And you need that in spades if you want to develop some of the stuff that we're doing. You cannot afford to sub out some of this development. It has to be done in-house. You get driverless cars wrong, it's driver-shaped cars at the end of the runway. That's what it means. It's people dying. This is really where we come into our own. We have very good graphical interfaces. Although we're using very complicated machinery, we design it in such a way that a technician can use it. So the engineer can get down to the track, start the testing straight away, because it's all set up in that certain way. So it's cars doing very complicated things, but actually using fairly simple procedures to get them working. And again, manufacturing's unfashionable these days, but we make everything ourselves and we produce everything ourselves. And that is actually my presentation. I'm happy to take some questions.
Thank you, Tim. Questions, anybody? Oh, lots of hands. Let's go over there first, if we can, and then we'll go to the gentleman over here.
Can you say something about the electrically powered car market and your role in it going forward?
Yeah, I think what is exciting is that the electric car market is not going to belong to the traditional car makers. If you are a company, a large tech company with a lot of cash, you can start with a complete clean sheet. You haven't got any legacy issues in terms of engine, plants, or emission issues. And I think as the market starts to look towards the driverless technology, I think electrical systems lend themselves to that. But the thing about it is that no one really understands dynamically how electric cars work. And this is why we've got to start looking at, this is why we're developing newer machines to test electric cars. Are they four-wheel drive? Are the motors in the wheels? Are they in the front? Some of the architecture you can look at is completely flat architecture with no impedance, huge amounts of room. But there are safety concerns, and that's really where it's going to be going to in the next couple of years. But for the first time, I think we've just got to that tipping point where electric cars will actually be a true reality.
Are you involved in battery testing for electric cars?
Yes, but on a virtual, in the virtual area.
Can you talk a little bit about cash and cash flow? You've got cash equivalent to H1 revenue. I just wonder what you're going to do with it.
Right. This is obviously the results from the half year. We are a cash generative company. At this point in time, we've got about 11 million in the bank. 6.5 is allocated towards the factory and the R&D, and the rest will be allocated towards a more aggressive, maybe M&E or a nascent M&E policy. It's only for the first time the company has grown to a certain point where it has the management structures in place, where it has the corporate structure, and it has basically a willing investor base to support the next stage of the company's expansion.
I'm just wondering, I mean, it's business as usual. You spoke, I don't really want to quote you too much, perhaps it was about not knowing other sectors. I just wonder whether it was business as usual or there were diversification issues ahead of you.
Yeah, I think for sure that the automotive R&D is where we are at, but it's a big pond, and there are other fish in those ponds we should be going after. There's quite a lot of adjacent technology we need to be either developing or acquiring. I mentioned our machines generate data that go into the models. Well, actually, we should be able to take those models, and that's where the simulator business comes in. It's taking those models and doing more with it. So we give more of a sort of, I wouldn't say holistic approach, but you can give an end-to-end approach when it comes to car development.
Is your forward order book driving the expansion in terms of premises, or is it the fact that what you're making is getting bigger?
What we're making is getting bigger, but also our forward order book goes forward 18 months. Right. We have very good visibility on our orders, because a lot of the order cycle starts with a dialogue or conversation with the car company. They're usually telling us what they're going to need so they can get it into the budget. So that's how we gauge the activity. If we feel not having those conversations, then we kind of know that we need to be doing something.
So will you be able to drive back the forward orders to 12 months or something, delivery, or?
Without a doubt, we've always had a problem with capacity in terms of manufacture, and the new factory will give us that headway. I would caution the fact that the new factory doesn't release a whole wellhead of unpent demand. It just gives us the headway to grow over the next 3, 4, 5 years.
Good. Okay. Question just down here.
You mentioned about 86 current staff, which seems quite lean given the growth. So have you got a massive recruitment drive? And you said you need very specialist engineers. So how do you see to manage that?
It is specialist engineering. I mean, what we have done is set up more de facto manufacturing, whereas before the engineer received the order, built the machine. Engineers aren't very good at building stuff, but technicians are. And so with that set up, we're much more efficient now in the manufacturing cycle. We've brought those lead times down. As it stands today, we're £270,000 per head of revenue. That's high. I mean, the national average is 130. Which means we're sweating the asset. And one of the things we've been doing is putting in classical admin, proper design, proper manufacturing. Those things will bring that dependency down. That number is about right for us in terms of technicians. And for the first time, we're starting to subcontract some of the development out to other parties. We don't have to make our own vision systems. There are other people that do that. And the simulator's been a good example of that. We've been able to contract out some of the build of the simulator to other third parties. And that will be something that we're going to be doing more of.
Question down the front.
Yeah, you mentioned that in this country you don't operate at all. Is that because you have rival competitors, or?
No, I just don't think we do the R&D that we think we do.
Ah.
There are a few companies like Ricardo and Myra who are very good. But, you know, go to Germany and there's 17 of those. I was in, I hate to paint this terrible picture, but I was in Stuttgart at Daimler in their testing place at Singlefingen. The guy said, there's 10,000 development engineers here. He said, see that building across the way there? That's a £25 million crash laboratory. See that building over there? That's a £40 million engine laboratory. It's just order of magnitude different to what we're used to. Sorry to say.
Is it just Jaguar Land Rover in the UK then, is it really, who are doing any
Yeah,
R&D?
they sub out to Myra and Ricardo.
All right.
Could I ask a quick question? It's a potential market opportunity based on the automotive scandals of the last year. Is there a market for independent testing? Because obviously a lot of the figures and the fraudulent figures that have been produced by a lot of car companies.
Well, the big...
it's not unclear to me what independence is used in generating those figures and whether there's an opportunity there for a company like this.
There is an opportunity. We don't test, but actually the real-world testing is about consistent testing on a road surface or a test track, and robots do that. So in fact, it is a new market, but I don't see it as a massive opportunity. I think the issue that we've got here is that the car companies have only followed the rules, and a very lax European standard was put in place, which I can only assume was lobbied. We've known for a while that the data coming from the car has nothing to do with what happens in the real world. But that's not the car company's fault. The Volkswagen situation in Germany was. But of course, the thing about it there is that all the Volkswagen diesels were brought back in, and all the Toyota hybrids were brought back out. So Toyota have had a great time in America this year.
I think Ricardo actually were here a few months ago and said that they do a lot of emission testing, and their testing is good. It's the manufacturers themselves testing that's the problem, but their testing is quite good.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Gentleman at the back.
Are you a passive company or are you proactive? I mean, where does the business come from? Does a car company come to you and say, can you do this for us? Or do you go along to a car company and say, we can do more for crash testing, etc., etc.? Where does it come from?
I think historically, the passive was where it came from. I mean, my background is much more about gearing up engineering and moving companies through those sort of growth phases. And in the last couple of years, we've become much more non-aggressive. We've now developing products for the first time that normally we always built a product with an order. So the order came in and we developed it and built it. These days there are adjacent products we're starting to make, which are now starting to, we wouldn't do it if there wasn't a market for it. But we are embarking on some development programs for quite new exciting products, which we don't actually have a customer for at this time. So that is much more aggressive, but we've got a pretty good idea about where the market is going. The trick is we sit and talk and listen to our customer. They tell us where they're going. And the German companies are very good at giving us a roadmap. They'll often sit down. If they trust you, they'll sit down and say, this is where the models are going, but this is how our testing is going to happen. So this is what's going to be happening in the next 2 years, and we'd like you to look at this sector. And historically, we've been never very good at looking at that. We've just been focusing on the bit that was right in front of us. You can always tell a key account because they tolerate your mistakes. And we do them. They indulge some of the stuff you get up to. But when I joined the company, what impressed me was the relationship they had with the engineers at the customer. And in fact, when they came to stay with us, they didn't go in the meeting rooms, they sat in the offices, and they still do that. So it's good. It's, like I said, it is definitely British engineering at its best, and it's what we're very good at doing. But we've always been in the thing about a bit hiding our light under the bushel. And quite often we brought out products, and the Germans said, well, I wish you'd told us about that earlier, because we've gone down a whole new route. We didn't know you were doing this. Well, we weren't sure, if you like it, don't want to be disappointed. But that's changed. I say, well, I know, let's be bold about what we do, because what we do is really good.
Time for one final question, anybody? Oh, 2 hands. Gentleman in the back again. Sorry.
Can you say something about growth opportunities in Russia?
Yeah, that was quick. None at this time. We have our agency seminar coming up next week, and one of the guys is coming over, but he's saying forget about things for a while. When it calms down. I think we sold one to Kazmin recently, but it's just not happening. Iran, that's happening. That's certainly picking up. There's a lot of pent-up demand there, but not for us in Russia.
Go on then.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about the share register, really, because you said that the founder, Anthony Best, is still around. Does he sort of own 50%?
No, he and his wife own 37%, and the rest of the shares is in public hands.
Okay, and institutional shareholders and private investors?
Yes. It's got quite a long tail, actually, I've noticed. There's a lot of retail interest. But the companies that came in at the beginning are still in and have added to their position. But more recently, we've seen a few swapping around. So Hargreave Hale have come in. Miton have gone out. But Artemis and the other companies all staying in.
Was it venture capital trust qualifying?
There was a bit of both. We raised 2.5 million of new money and 2.5 of old money. But actually both portions of stock were oversubscribed.
And your market cap's 70 million, I think.
82.
Oh, right, sorry. And you've been on a roadshow just quite recently, haven't you?
Yes, we have.
Business, so.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
No,
Tim.
thank you.
Thank you.